Understanding how various cultures do business has never been more important in the meetings industry, and that was the subject of one of this year's CIBTM's education sessions. Daniel and Tschudy, you are presenting a really important session at this year's CIBTM, all about getting over cultural differences. It's part of the education session here at the show. So we all know that it's important to be on culture when you're doing business, but how does that manifest itself within the meetings and incentive space?
Well, with all respect, English is number one. People have to be aware of the fact that the SMS type of language, the short, mediocre, small talk type of language is not enough to do business. It's not enough to handle conferences and incentive travel around the world. And I think even planners and incentive houses and incentive agencies should be aware of the fact that they should train their language in order to express what they need, in order to express their detailed expectations that they have. That's one thing. The other thing, of course, and that counts for both sides, China as well as the Western world, so to speak. The Chinese have to be aware of the fact that the Western world is not one thing. Doing business with Germany is totally different than doing business with Italy or bringing traffic to South Africa or doing business in India. And of course, the foreign community also must learn about the Chinese behavior, their values, and what they can do and why, and which elements they cannot perform well and why not. And I think that's the issue.
So first of all, then, let's look at Chinese people doing business in the rest of the world. Just let's have some very, very sort of basic, I know you could go on for hours about this because it's a very, very interesting subject, but an initial sort of few tips on a very sort of strong basic approach to be taking.
Well, yes, the Chinese have to accept that they might have to be a little bit critical on their own behavior and understand that some of the fashion they take with them when they travel the world is not accepted or not received in the same way in Europe. One could say that the Chinese are relatively loud in a group. Yes, that's one issue. Maybe that's something you can tell your audience, and then once they are in Switzerland or in Germany in a hotel, the hotel staff would also feel more comfortable towards the Chinese. And if both sides understand that issue, they might perform better together and find its closer way together. So I think it is really a question of understanding how do you behave in a foreign country, and that counts for every 200 nations around the world, whether this is Ecuadorian traffic in Buenos Aires or whether this is Ghana traffic in London, England. Of course you have to prepare. First, it's the English command. Secondly, it's the research. And if you don't have time, why don't you jump on Wikipedia and get some information there? If you have time, for example, if you do an inspection trip in India or for an incentive travel from China to India, why don't you travel there 1 or 2 days earlier? Why don't you ask your Indian counterpart to explain you about the behaviors, about the colors, about the emotions, about the notions, and so forth? I think the issue is interactive communication, but interactive communication requires good English command, and then it requires a certain respect. Yes, there are differences. We behave different than those people behave different than other people. And I think it's an awareness program that must go in also into the Chinese mice industry. Be careful, bringing a group to Chengdu or bringing a group to Shanghai does not require the same preparation as bringing a group to Moscow, for that matter.
So moving on to the West coming to the East, and companies from the US, from South America, from even the Arab states, and also obviously Europe coming into China. Let's flip that around. And what do they have to look out for?
Well, I think what you can say that the Chinese the Chinese are very good event organizers. They're very good logistic planners. They can handle this, but maybe they do lack a little bit the time flexibility. We or certain Western nations have a different understanding of time and space. Therefore, for example, in terms of time, we might not respect the same departure punctuality for coaches, or for example, if we are on an event and the event is in a good fashion, then we'd like to extend it. We'd like to be flexible about this. We'd like to explore a momentum, and that, of course, in the Chinese culture does not have a space, because in the Chinese culture things are preset, pre-agreed, pre-arranged, and then you respect that. And there, of course, is quite often a little bit elements for misunderstandings, and then maybe also disappointments, and those issues have to be tackled in advance. For example, if you have people from Portugal or from Spain, they do react different than people from Germany or from Denmark. And if you have delegates, transfers for people from the Mediterranean countries, you know they might be late, and you have to calculate this. Whereas if you have people from Germany or even from England, that matter, they would have more discipline to follow that. So these type of preparations helps you to finally prepare a great program.
I suppose what you're talking about generally, and I know that your session itself is going into this in a lot more depth, is really that cross communication and starting that dialogue early on, so that all expectations are put on the table and you meet, your clients' expectations as close as you possibly can do.
Absolutely, it just needs more time, and that seems to be in conflict with today's world, where everything should be done quick and fast and immediate, and you have an application to a hotel, what is the rate, how many rooms, quick in, quick out. But the truth is, the better you prepare yourself, the better you can train your audience. And if your audience are conference participants or corporate clients, if you can tell them what's it going to be in India, for example, if you can bring them the nuances, if you can tell them about the noises, the music, etc., but also the body languages, the direct eye contact, yes or no, the touching or not touching, all those issues, but also the greetings and how you do that, the better you prepare yourself, the more successful will your program be. That's a fact.